Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
My pleasure to be on.
We are continuing our series, Questions About the Quran. And this time we're going to look at why was the Quran memorized? I feel like the Quran is a very unique book, Dr. Shabir, in the sense that in the beginning, it wasn't actually a book as we have it now, but it was memorized orally.
That's right. That's right. Well, nowadays most people are literate and we like to see things in writing. But in past societies, people were generally not literate. And in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that was the situation. Most people were not literate. And, even in our literate culture now, you have lectures being presented orally. You've been to university and you've delivered lectures yourself. So why not write your lecture on a paper and hand it out to all of the students?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can do that too. But there is a certain place in the human mind for, oral presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So people want to hear it. And the Quran was heard by people. God revealed the Quran in such a way that it would be recited by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So it didn't drop down from heaven as a printed text. It was revealed into the mind of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He recited it publicly, delivered it orally, recited it in the public prayers. And his companions then received the text, they memorized it, and they passed it on to the next generation. So people who were not trained to read or write could still all benefit from the Quranic revelation. They could know what God is saying to them, and God is really saying it to them, but of course through human mouthpieces.
When you spoke about the need to hear things and to watch things, it kind of made me think about poetry, right? Because the Quran is very poetic, and we love to hear poetry. We love to hear it recited, right? Not just to read it, but to hear it recited. Do you think that's the reason why God made the Quran so poetic?
Well, God could have made, theoretically, he could have made it in writing, and it would still, have its own cadence in writing as well. And of course it does, even on the printed page. But so it's not the need to make it poetic that caused it to be delivered orally. We can say that the fact that it will be delivered orally meant that God would make it interesting through that medium. And one of the interesting ways, or one of the interesting features of the Quran is its rhyme, its rhythm, its cadence, the sound of it, the beautiful sound of it.
So how does the memorization work? I understand that the Prophet Muhammad himself was memorizing. It wasn't just like he was getting the revelation. He was also making efforts to try to remember it himself.
Yes, Muslim tradition also has the idea that somehow the Quran was imprinted into the mind of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, not by being burnt into his mind, because the mind is not a physical thing. But somehow the way it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it is not expected that he himself will forget it. At least that's Muslim theology. The Quran says, "Sanuqri'uka fala tansa," in the 87th chapter of the Quran. Which means something like God saying to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, will cause you to read in a way that you will not forget. Illa ma sha Allah, except what Allah wills. So that means if Allah wills that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, should forget something, he would. But probably Allah does not will that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would forget anything. It's just that the Quran again and again emphasizes the absolute will of God. Like whatever God wills is going to happen. Whatever he wills not to happen cannot happen. And in this case, because God is in a way depicting some power of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, like he is not going to forget, the refrain is added, illa ma sha Allah, except what God wills. So that one does not get the idea that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has like a superhuman memory. One should always recall that God's will is what is overwhelming, and he is empowering the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to memorize this revelation that's given to him.
So at that point, then the Prophet Muhammad was imparting that knowledge of the Quran to other people as well, right? He was I don't know if he had a group of followers around him who would come and listen to those recitations.
Yes, it is obvious from the Quran itself that he had followers who were memorizing and learning the book. For example, in the 29th chapter of the Quran, in the 46th verse, there is this discourse about the people doubting the Quran. Muslims are called upon to share the Quran with other people, the message of the Quran, and then the response of the other people are mentioned. The responses are mentioned. Some will object to the Quran, and the Quran is said, "This is ayat. These are revelations." في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم, in the hearts of those who have been given knowledge. So that seems to point to the memorization process, and the fact that it's not only the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who has memorized the text, but there are people around him who are memorizing as well. The 25th chapter of the Quran, again, giving the responses of the objectors, the Quran has them say that the Quran is ancient tales. Asatirul awwalin iktatabaha fahiya tumla alayhi bukratan wa asila. These are ancient tales which the Prophet Muhammad, according to the objectors, taught his followers, and so they are then repeating it back to him.
Mm-hmm.
So that might hint at the schooling process, where a teacher reads to the student tries to grasp the lesson, and then reads it back to the master. So that must have been what was happening in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the interchange of the Quran between him and his companions as he's teaching them, and they're reading it back to him.
Mm-hmm. Do we know, Dr. Shabir, how many people actually memorized the Quran in the Prophet's time? Were there some people who memorized just bits and then other people who memorized the entire thing?
In Muslim tradition has a long list of names, and a great scholar from Riyadh, he's an Indian scholar, but he was most recently based in Riyadh, where he taught, and God have mercy on him. Muhammad Mustafa Azmi, in his book, The History of the Quran Text, has prepared a list of some 52 persons who have been known to memorize the Quran, and then he wrote a book called Kutab al-Wahi, or the writers of the Revelation, in which he has gone into more detail about the scribes, people who have been writing down the Quran in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But such long lists come from piecing together many diverse reports, and we cannot be confident that all of these reports are of the same quality in terms of their authenticity and verifiability. The Hadith collection, which is known as Sahih al-Bukhari, has some narratives which say that only 4 persons memorized the Quran in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So what to make of that? One might expect that many more people had memorized at least portions of it. And indeed, many of the reports probably have this flavor about it, that somebody was known to be a careful student of the Quran. They had memorized many parts of it, but there was no clear testing process to say, okay, you sit down and recite the whole Quran and we're going to check you and then certify you. So it's possible that many persons had memorized large portions of the Quran, but there were 4 persons who might have been certified by the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself, because he heard them read the whole thing, and he could testify that these are the persons that you can take the Quran from, because they have passed their tests. So that's probably why we have in Bukhari. They mentioned that only 4 persons memorized, and at the same time, we have diverse reports saying that other people memorized as well.
So, Dr. Shabir, now that we have the written copy of the Quran, now that the Quran has been written down, do you think there's still value to memorizing the Quran today?
There is still value. The value is not, at least one aspect of that value is not as prominent as it used to be in the past, because writing materials were scarce, especially in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Though paper was invented in China, it will take another century for it to become widely used in the Prophet's community. So memorizing the Quran at that time was a way of preserving it. And Muslims can proudly boast, look, if you take all of the copies now of the Quran and burn them out of spite, still the Muslims have the Quran memorized in their minds, and they could reproduce it by just gathering the readers together. But now that the Quran has been preserved in writing and on memory sticks and all of that, and in the cloud, then that need for memorizing it is not as prominent now. But nonetheless, Muslims see great reward in memorizing the whole text, and it still remains a matter of pride among Muslims that, as the Quran itself says, God has made this book easy to memorize, and is there anyone to memorize it? And Muslims are responding to that challenge by memorizing the book.
Thank you for that, Dr. Shabir. In the next installation, we'll be looking at how the Quran was written down.
Sure.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe, and please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.